Hi, everybody. This is Slava Kurilyak, and I want to welcome you to another live stream where we discuss how entrepreneurs, decision makers, and business folks can leverage AI technologies to solve business problems. Today, we are discussing research and how AI technologies can help with research tasks. I want to welcome everyone here. I would like to start this live stream by asking people where they're from. So if you're joining us at this moment, feel free to comment in the section below or on your right-hand side, depends where you're joining from, and you will be able to leave a comment and simply type your city or country. I will start. I am from Vancouver, Canada, and I am excited to kick off this live stream. Again, this is a live event, so if you have any questions about what I discuss, if you have any comments and you would like to surface them with myself and the audience, I encourage you to leave I encourage you to raise your hand and jump into the live stream with me. And you can do that by going to the link that you see on your screen called go.produvia.com/live. This is a link that'll take you into a studio where you'll be able to share your screen and you'll be able to ask questions. This is one of the best ways for you to jump into the event itself. And if you don't want to jump in, if you don't have access to a camera or are not in the best setting, I encourage you to text me live. My number is in the section below. And by texting me, you'll be able to ask me a question and I'll be able to address it during this live stream. This live stream is meant to educate, inspire, and share best practices with individuals who are interested to use AI technologies to solve business problems. Today, we are discussing artificial intelligence and its applications in research, and I want to welcome everyone who is with us. I also want to kick things off by sharing my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I see and you'll be able to gain access to a visual presentation. So let's do this. Bear with me while I set this up. I remind you this is a live event, which means that you have the information that I share, as well as you ask questions at any time. So let's see if we can share my screen and then you can kick things off here. Perfect. Now you will see side by side both myself and my screen. This is one of the best ways for you to learn how you can use AI technologies to solve research problems. The screen share will give you additional insights. Now, if you're interested to see this presentation and get a copy of it, then I encourage you to leave a comment in the event or simply text me. And again, the number for those who have missed them is down below. So you should be able to see that and then simply send me a text, tell me that you're watching this live stream and that you're interested, and I will text you or send you the link to the presentation itself. That's quite convenient, especially if you are joining partly into this conversation or are unable to stick for the entire duration. And this live stream is part of a series of live streams that I do to share best practices on how individuals can leverage AI technologies. I encourage everyone who's listening to watch other events, join other events, participate. This is an open platform. You have the choice to participate or simply observe. And I also want to thank you for being here with us on a Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Let's dive deeper. So research and AI. Now, this is a fascinating domain, and I want to highlight just a few of the distinctions that I see in the space. It's important to emphasize that there are different ways to classify or think about research, and it's quite relevant to which problem you're solving. So some problems require that you focus on the market or marketing side. Others require you to focus on the user or user experience, often referred to as UX. And other types of domains require you to focus on the product, often synonymous with research and development, or just project or product development. So there are different domains. Here I list 5 of the most common that I see, and the specific AI that is able to help with these domains, it really depends on what specific problem that we're aiming to solve within that domain, right? So in the case of, for example, market research, we are performing an evaluation of the market. We are doing research on the market, meaning all of the key stakeholders, key players, key constituents in a market. We evaluate supply, demand, and all of the other relevant stakeholders. So this is, again, just an overview of what are some of the domains for using AI technologies to solve research problems. I think this is a good starting point for us to dive deeper into the actual application itself. So now we want to share a little bit more about different ideas. So the first idea I want to mention here is, we can brainstorm ideas using these technologies. And here are the 5 ideas that I will go deeper into. So if you're interested, feel free to take a screenshot of this particular frame, this particular slide, and then this is a holistic overview of what we are talking about today. Now, these ideas are just a tip of the iceberg. There are so many ways to use AI technologies, and actually there are no limits to how AI technologies can solve problems. So it really is important to understand that the limitations that we see are usually not around technology. They are usually around creativity. Technologies are just not, and if they are, then we're able to overcome them oftentimes by gathering more data. And this is actually a holistic overview of AI technology, and I think it's important for individuals to understand. So one of the best reasons for using AI technology, for using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and especially deep learning, is that we're able to create systems that learn from data. And this is a key distinction, right? In the past, we've had technologies like cloud computing or blockchain, and they would work, but they would not work because we had more data. They would work because we defined rules and we were very explicit in what to do with that data. We wanted to move data from one point to another. We wanted to reference data. We wanted to copy data. We wanted to make sense of data. We wanted to transform data. All of these typical processes that we often attribute to with data and data management is really about using data in a simple way, right? Today's most complex software are behind the scenes just using rules and just using simple if-then conditions. And this is important to understand. This concept is called classical programming, and I want to emphasize that there are so many different ways to use technology, whether we're talking about classical programming or machine learning driven programming. But there is a clear distinction. Companies today that are using AI technologies are leapfrogging their competition because they are leveraging AI technology. And the difference between classical programming or machine learning programming is that companies are able to leverage statistics to make sense of data and focus on data. And that frees companies from, for example, focusing their time on the rules of the application, and it allows companies to spend more time on the data. So spend less time on algorithms and more time on data. Now, that's important distinction is that any company that starts going down the path of AI is actually also leveraging data to solve problems. And by focusing on data, they start to rethink about how they hire individuals and what is their differentiator. So in a world where capital leverage is available to everyone, as companies grow, they are using permissions and they are using permissioned capital labor to scale their companies. And the difference between one company and another, the difference between a company that's using, for example, traditional software engineers and more modern machine learning practitioners, is that they have given importance to data. And if we consider the differentiator, the competitive advantage that companies are establishing today, it's usually not in the capital leverage, although yes, there is a lot of advantages to hiring very smart and very bright folks. That major sort of advantage that we see are when companies are combining code leverage, when they're combining media leverage, and they're combining capital leverage, capital and labor rather. So that's 4, right? So code, media, capital, and labor. So the best companies today are using all forms of leverage to scale their products and services. And the difference between one company that gets ahead when they use AI is that they give more importance to data and that they're able to leverage just the necessary amount of code and focus their time on data. So I think now is a great time to start discussing the 5 ideas. The first idea is that we can use computers to generate, can use the computers to brainstorm ideas, right? Okay, so now we have the infrastructure or the intention to leverage computer science technologies to solve problems. How can we do that? Well, one of the best ways, one of the most underutilized ways today is to leverage generative models, sometimes referred to as generative adversarial networks or GANs, or there are many names that people use when they're referring to generative models. So generative models are an amazing technology to use if you want to explore ideas. These models are expanding the human creativity by augmenting it with computational creativity. So let's discuss what are some of the generative models that we see. Well, there's actually quite a few, right? So I'll share with you a few of the examples, a few of the most common methods, and then that'll give you a better understanding of what they do and how they work. Now, generative models typically are models that are solving computer vision tasks. In other words, they're usually solving tasks with images and videos, but they don't have to be. Now these models can be used for other types of domain problems. So what are generative models? For those who are not familiar, these models aim to generate data, and it's in opposition, or it's different than generated data and discriminatively. So they're aiming to approximate probability distribution of data, and they're aiming to come up with new data that was not seen before. a few of the common examples of generative models include autoencoders, GANs, as I've previously mentioned, VAEs, cycle GANs, denoising autoencoders. So there's many names that people use to describe these models, but holistically, these models help us to generate something. And today we can use these models to come up with different ideas and to brainstorm ideas. So that's the first point I wanted to touch base on. We can brainstorm, we can leverage computational creativity to do brainstorming. The second use case is if we're focusing on market or marketing research, then we can actually use this technology to discover trends. And this is a very important domain problem to solve. So we know, for example, that there is a lot of publicly available data about markets, right? I've mentioned to you before the data related to supply and demand of products or services. But if you go on Google and you search for certain keywords, you will see different types of data over time, right? So let's say you're searching for how manufacturing is changing, then you can do a Google trend search for manufacturing, and you will see different examples of what has happened to manufacturing over time, and you will also track how search volume changes over time, right? And this is an incredible data set that is available to anyone who's willing to play with this technology. So in other words, you can understand market trends and you can now predict them if you start to use publicly available data or private data, and now you're doing something called time series predictions. So time series models are an excellent way to leverage AI technology to solve real problems. Okay, so this is the second use case I wanted to chat with you about, and I think it's an important one because we're aiming to figure out what's happening in the market. Right? This is very relevant, especially if we think about what has happened due to COVID-19. We saw that the market changed very quickly in 2020. We saw that the market had dynamically adjusted itself based on a variety of factors. And the market, with all of the stimulus, had to make some hard decisions. And so every decision affected the next party, right? And so coming up with predictions on what would happen next was critical, right? If, for example, that we could predict ourselves as people that more people would stay at home, it was essential that the technologies were working with us side by side, and they were predicting the same thing, that the machine learning models would predict that that the demand due to COVID sort of cases the demand for travel, for example, will decrease as COVID cases is increasing. So this is just a few examples of what is sort of happening in the marketplace and why we need to make predictions in that marketplace. So discovering market trends, predicting market are similar concepts. And one of the ways to do that is to use quantitative data and predict when things will happen and at what quantity. So one easy way to do that is look at what people are searching for and look at search volume over time. But you can also look at social media data, and you can look at hashtags to determine what people say and how they feel about certain topics. So these are just a few examples of what kind of publicly available data you can use. Now, if a company has private data, that's even better. Private data gives companies the ability to leverage and create a competitive advantage over other companies. And private data is actually, from my perspective, the differentiator. It's what helps companies to set themselves apart from others. And this is the perfect way to now expand on that data. If a company has data, that's great, it's data-driven. Now, if a company starts to use AI technologies, that's the next stage. This is called being AI-driven. So we often start with data-driven companies or data-driven strategies, and then we expand, right? We go beyond sort of the data approach, and we think, what is the best way to use this data? And what is the best way to augment this data? What is the best way to enrich this data? Now, if a company is interested to sort of evolve past being data-driven and they want to start considering more advanced technologies like AI, then I encourage that our watchers and listeners think about, what's important to you. What is the vision that you have, and then what is the impact that you want to make. Right? These questions will help you to figure out what you want and where you're going, and more importantly, what kind of benefit do you want to create, not just for yourself or your team, but for society. And answering these questions will give you clarity, right? If you want to have, for example, a discussion with an artificial intelligence agency about how they can help you to solve problems, then you need to be prepared, you need to do your homework and answer these questions for yourself. And this is what we do at Produvia. So if you're interested to chat about artificial intelligence and how it can help to solve research problems, then I encourage you to click the link below that you see on your screen. And that's Produvia.com, Produvia.com. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the live stream. The third idea, we want to discover the best performing models to solve problems. And we can do this using different techniques, one of which is automated machine learning. So for those who are not familiar, AutoML, for short, is one of the best technologies that researchers can use to save themselves time and ultimately to perform AI-driven calculations faster. So behind the scenes, these models are doing neural network search, hyperparameter optimization, and other tasks to help you so that you as a researcher can solve your problem. Now, oftentimes, if you have data that's great AI technologies, you actually need all the assistance you can get so that you can actually solve the problem. And the most effective way to solve that problem is to use software that can help you to figure out what is the best architecture. So automated machine learning helps you to figure out the architecture necessary to solve the problem. And for those who are not familiar with the concept, architectures is simply a diagram or a way of representing a neural network or an AI system. Architectures show you what happens with data as it moves through the neural layers of a system. Architectures are quite different and unique. So the most common architecture, if you're solving image or video problems, is the convolutional neural network. If you're dealing with text and speech, rather, you're using recurrent neural networks. And if you're dealing with text or conversational data, then you're using transformers. So these are just a few examples of what people do. Last architecture I wanted to share, which I think is fundamental in its application across multiple domains, is the multi-layer perceptron, MLP for short, which has been primarily adapted in recommendation systems. So to come back to the topic of the benefit of using AutoML is that it allows researchers and practitioners to automatically discover the best performing models for their tasks. And ultimately, this saves a lot of time. Okay, so the fourth idea is leveraging modern cloud services to take models from research and deploy them into production. So one of the biggest frustrations of research is bridging the gap between research and production. In other words, from the idea all the way through execution. And these problems are manifested in different ways, right? Whether we're describing the concept of companies that take time to find ideas, figure out which ideas are worth exploring, and develop the specific idea, launch the idea, and or we're talking about costs, right? So to go from a prototype to a developed product, you need to spend capital. And today's companies, modern companies, they want to minimize how long it takes to go from idea to launch. And they also want to minimize the capital expenditures to go from prototype to production. And today I see many trends in the AI space, one of which is to use serverless architectures to deploy research models into production. Okay, so the fifth and final idea that I wanted to mention is prototyping faster using generative models. So this is an amazing concept that I wanted to explore, and I think it's worth exploring. So as I've mentioned before, you can use serverless architectures, which is a cloud service to help you to take models, put them in the cloud, sort of remove the necessity to manage those models. But with the fifth idea I wanted to share is that you're actually able to prototype faster by using generative models. So this is similar to the first idea where we're aiming to brainstorm ideas. In this case, we're aiming to generate different prototypes that will help us so we can better figure out which prototype is more fitting to our use case. So imagine you come into the office and you're using a generative model, meaning a model that's powered by AI technologies. You click a button and you see 5 different generative designs or prototypes that you can then play around with. Whether you're talking about physical prototypes or digital prototypes, it really does not matter for what you're creating. But if you're using technology to help you with the creation process itself, this is fundamental. This is to save yourself time and computational creativity. So far, we've discussed 5 different use cases of AI technologies, and I wanted to highlight that if we have individuals who are interested to receive this entire presentation, I encourage you to reach out and send me a text. And the text number I will link right below, and so you can see that, and I'll be able to send you a link to the presentation itself. So for those who have missed the earlier part of the presentation or would like to see a overview without me sort of jumping back in time, I encourage you to text me. So this is the best way to do that. And I also encourage everyone who is listening and watching us that, if you have a question or you would like to make a comment, I also encourage you to jump in and have a conversation with me. If you go to the link below, you'll be able to jump into a live stream with me. You'll be able to share your video or your audio, and then you can ask me a question and raise your hand and feel free to make a statement. So this is an interactive feature that allows you to have a one-on-one conversation with me and our audience. And then again, if you're not able to jump in with audio or video, I encourage you to text me with the number that you see below. So this is a great segue to recap what we discussed, right? So far, we've discussed 5 different areas of market, and rather of research, everything from market to marketing to product, user, and user experience. These are just 5 of the most common domains that people aim to solve. I also want to mention that we've so far also discussed 5 different AI use cases or applications for how individuals can solve problems, right? Everything from generating ideas, and now the 5th and final is to prototyping faster. So now I think is a great time to start wrapping things up. I encourage everyone who is listening and watching this that if you have a specific question, feel free to comment in the section below. And if you are interested, you can also text me and I'll be able to address your question offline. And I also want to start concluding that if you are interested to apply artificial intelligence to solve research problems, then I encourage you to reach out and have a one-on-one conversation with me. This is a free consultation. We do this with all clients, and our goal is to help you to figure out if there is a use case for artificial intelligence to solve your problem, right? AI technology, as I've mentioned before, has no limits. The only limits we impose are the limits of creativity, and those are usually self-imposed. So if you have any idea that you're interested to pursue, I encourage you to reach out and schedule a brief phone call. And the phone call to that is linked down below. That is produvia.com/start. This is a way for you to schedule that phone call. I also want to conclude that this live stream is part of a series of live streams that I do to educate, inspire, and share best practices for entrepreneurs, business folks, and decision makers on how they can use AI technologies to solve business problems. If you're interested to stay up to date, I encourage you to subscribe by going to the link below. That is produvia.com/subscribe. And this is one of the best ways to know when we go live. Now, this is a live event. This is being broadcast across multiple platforms, including LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Periscope, OKVK, and many others. So if you're joining from these platforms, I want to welcome you to our live event. If you have any questions, I encourage you to leave them in the comment section, because this is your opportunity to speak up. And once the event is over with, you will have a chance to speak up at our upcoming event. And if you're interested to learn when we go live, I encourage you to subscribe to our live calendar. We also publish regularly on the topic of artificial intelligence. So if you're interested to read, not just watch videos, I encourage you to also subscribe. This is a way for you to learn how to solve problems. The goal here is share and educate. And if you find this valuable, I encourage you to subscribe on the social media and follow us on the platform you're joining from. I think this is a great moment to end the live stream. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to conclude and summarize that AI technologies are extremely powerful. They can help individuals and companies to solve very complex problems. And today we've discussed how AI can solve research problems. If you are interested to see this presentation in more detail, I encourage you to text me, and then I will send you a link to the event itself. Thank you everyone for joining me. Have a great rest of Thursday.